Welcome everyone to NoCoders Office Hours, episode number 204. I'm your host, Tanya, and we're here with our members, Thomas, Jordan, and Kelly. We're gonna get started in just a moment, but first, if this is your first time tuning into NoCoders Office Hours, what it is we hold 6 Zoom sessions every week, and our office hours members can come on the Zoom calls with us and ask us any bubble questions they want, and we do our best to get them answered. Of course, we can't promise all of the answers because no one has all of the answers, but we do promise you won't suffer alone. And to that end, let's go ahead and get started with some questions. Thomas, do you have anything for today?
Nope.
Jordan?
No, I don't. I just sort of jumped on to say hello.
That's awesome. We're happy to see you. I think, Kelly, you do, so.
I do. It's all me today. This is very
awesome.
exciting. Well, we'll see if someone else shows up and has a more interesting problem. But so I'm launching an app in the next couple days, and I haven't set up any privacy rules. And I understand the concept, but I just want someone to sort of just like talk me through it, I guess. So I don't know if it would be helpful if I showed you what I've built for context, or if how do you do this? I don't know.
It's a good question. I think why don't I go through it generally, and then you can point me to specifics that you need more clarification on.
Great.
And because it might end up depending on how you set up your database. But essentially, you have all of these data types, and you want some of them to be publicly visible, but usually not most of them. Most of them you would want to have privacy rules applied. And then you want to set up several rules to allow different types of users to see different things. So the most important one in general is going to be your user. Almost always, I like to sort of section off the user and only allow the current user or the app admin to see what's in the user's data, right? So the way we would do that for role-based things is like this is set up. So the admin, if the current user's role is app admin, then they can see everything in all of the records. We could even allow for auto binding for some of these things if we're using auto binding for app admins. One thing I would add here that Eli, I also noticed does, and I was kind of excited because I was like, oh, I'm not the only one who's paranoid about that, is adding and current user is logged in to each of these, so that as soon as the user is logged out, they would stop seeing things that they're not allowed to see. And then, so this is the structure that, like, this is sort of the expression that would limit it is used here. And then the thing to understand about it is that what's happening is if I go to a page, let's just play around with it. Let's go to privacy rules. And we're not cloning, we'll just create it. I honestly thought this was a really good idea that I saw from someone, was just to create one of these pages and then a repeating group for any of the non-public data types. And then you could test and see if it was working. So I'm going to make this data type, or this repeating group type, user, and do a search for all users. And then I'm going to put in here text just to show the user's name. And then if I go back to my data rules here, for the user, if the current user is an app admin and is logged in, they should be able to see everybody. If that's not the case, then if the current user is this user, and I'll just add this and the current user is logged in, then they should be able to see their own user, but not everyone else. And then we'll just remove the permissions for everyone else. So right now, if I preview this page, I shouldn't see anything because I'm not logged in as a user at the moment. And I don't. I see that there's a repeating group, but I don't even have any scroll on it, and I can't see anything in there. So then, and honestly, this might seem silly, because why would you ever send a user to a page where there would be a repeating group where they can't see anything? But really the important thing is that what we're actually doing is we're preventing Bubble from ever sending any information about a user that doesn't fit those two rules that we wrote back to the browser. Because someone who knows what they're doing could potentially send their own query to the database, or if we are returning data back that doesn't fit those privacy rules, they might be able to see it when they inspect the page and do some manipulation in the developer console here. So that's the reason for the privacy rules. So then now I'm going to come back into my data and go and run this as this user who's not an app admin. And so now I see that one user, my user that I'm logged in as, I see that their information. And if I go and I run as the admin, then I'll see both users. So that's the basics of setting up privacy rules. Now, the things that get tricky is when you have, if you just have an app admin and you just have a current user, and the current user only needs to see their own information, then these two rules will carry through everything, and everything will work perfectly. Where it becomes more complex is when the current user needs to interact with other users' information. So is that what
mine has that? Yeah.
Okay.
It's a very interactive social kind of app. Yeah.
Social app. Yeah. So then what you're going to get into is more granular detail. One of the things that I do is I tend to set up the current user, so like the user data type, with things that I don't want to show to other people. Right. Mm-hmm. So like I wouldn't want to expose the email, for instance, any kind of really private information. Like I might use usernames instead of first and last, that sort of thing. So I wouldn't use any of this information to show to someone else. Instead, what I would do is separate it out into a user profile and make the user profile publicly visible. Right? Or
you have a separate data type.
Yeah. Yep. And that way I know that the stuff that I never want anybody to see would be perfectly protected, and the stuff that would be fine for people to see would be in a user profile. The other thing that you can do, though, is you can do granular here and just say, okay, I want other people to be able to see the, like maybe see the first name, and maybe they can see the profile picture. And if you're using usernames, they might be able to see the slug, right? Mm-hmm. If not every user should be able to see every other user's public information, then it would come down to a different rule. So you could take these off and you could say friends, right, for a social app. And so you would say if this user's friends, or you could, if current user probably it would be something that's stored on this user, right? So like you would be storing a list of friends or something. However, the relationship would exist in your database to to be able to succinctly. There are some limitations in terms of how this works. So you just have to kind of practice with it and get good at it. But like you could say, if current users company, for instance, that's a popular one. So if current users company, so it can come here, or it will allow me to make a new field. Yeah. So company, and the field type here, we'll just say text, but you could make it of type company. Is this user's company? Then you could share that information with them. Right?
So this user is who they're looking at?
This user is the user's record that is they will either, the current user will either be allowed to see or not allowed to see.
Okay.
So in this case, when I'm previewing here and I see these users here, this user is this user and this user. So 1 and 2, each of these are this user in this scenario, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And then current user is the one with the permissions to either see this user or this user.
Okay. Got it. Yeah.
Yep. You can't get too fancy with these rules. So you have to be careful and be on the lookout because it's very subtle if you, let me see if I can get an example here. So current users company, let's try something else.
You can't nest, right? Like you can't say like this company's employees. You can't say.
Exactly. Because
Okay.
and Bubble will tell you that you can't, but it doesn't tell you in a very obvious way. It just like adds a little like disclaimer at the bottom that says we can't do that. But it's not, it doesn't turn red for some reason. It just kind of tells you that it can't do it. It's very weird and it's not like Bubble at all. So
in order to get around that, you would need to probably create a list on the data type so that it is a direct relationship, right?
Yeah, you would have to figure out how to make a direct relationship for the rule you want to make exactly. Okay. And then like I know, for instance, we would never want to have a list of friends on the user, for instance, right? Almost always we would want to have a relationship thing that contains both the current user and the other user. But you can't do that here for privacy rules. So you have to figure something else out. So that's why like it might be better to have a public profile where it's not sensitive information that's being shared sometimes. And then you're not preventing people from seeing it through the privacy rules. You're just preventing people from seeing it on the page by not creating an interface for them to see it.
Yeah.
So, let's see if I can come up with one of those rules that this user. Orders, items. Yeah, there. Rules that use users X's Y can't grant search access right now.
Got it.
And then the trickiest thing is when you start implementing privacy rules, it will break things that were working before. So debugging it can be kind of mind-boggling, and it takes a little bit of time to develop the instinct to go to your privacy rules first. But I would recommend that every time something is not working the way you expect it to go back and check your privacy rules. Yeah.
Okay.
And then in the future, I would recommend building out your privacy rules to be super strict from the very beginning. And then you'll run into the privacy rules debugging as you're building, and then it won't be a big effort at the end.
Right. Interesting. That's tricky because your data kind of evolves as you're building.
It does.
Right.
And so what Bubble did a few months ago is they made the default everything locked down. And then I'm guessing they got so overrun with people like dropping off and not doing Bubble at all anymore, and people complaining to their support, that they made it more like this, make this state like a checkbox that you have to opt into.
Yeah.
And you can in your settings now, I think it's in general, you can make data types private by default. And that's something at AirDev that we started doing is our designers are the first ones that get in there to create an app, and then they have to go through and make everything private by default. Let's see if I can. Maybe it's in. I have to see where I can find it. But if you check that, then you know you won't be missing it. Like it'll make that privacy by default, and then you'll be frustrated because things won't work, but you'll find it, and when you find it, you'll be creating your privacy rules as you go. So
right. So in an instance like mine, where essentially I can view other people's profile, and I can see anything on their profile that person can see. Like we would have the same permissions, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's another reason to break out anything like into a user profile as opposed to on the user is you can see I have a lot, and maybe in your app you don't, and probably you don't. I have a lot of things on the user data type to begin with. And every time those things, the records, a user record is loaded onto a page, or I shouldn't say loaded onto the page, I should say retrieved from Bubble. Bubble is returning all of this information, even if you only need the first few fields. So it can improve the app's performance by separating out into a user profile. So you're only pulling back the fields that you actually need to show on the page.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
That's one thing I hope that at some point they would change, because I think that's one of the biggest performance issues that they're having. And I think someone told me that they said that this year they're planning on focusing on Google search results, like speeding things up and making things good for Google search. And that app speed is absolutely going to play the biggest role in that.
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask this. I have so many questions. Okay, so one of them is that, like, let's say I set some privacy rules on fields that are like, you know, I don't want to download and I don't need anyone to see. They're not even necessarily private, but it's like the last time they logged in or whatever, right? Just kind of basic stuff that like I want to, they don't need access to, right? But those fields are used in searches. That's okay, right? Because the searches are happening on the server. Like if I only want to view users that have logged in the last week or something. So I'm using that in the search, but I want to have a
so what I'm saying is right now, and I would assume that it would change either, probably not even in the privacy, right? Probably right in the data types. Like I don't have a way to tell Bubble that I do or don't want each of these fields returned every time I search for a record. So when I send a query, when I do a search for users, all of the users that meet the constraints that I set for that search will be returned by Bubble to the browser with every single field of information for every user, regardless of which fields I'm actually using on the page.
Even if I set a rule that says,
yep. So if you did, well, okay. So if you set the rule and only certain fields would come back, then yeah, that can save you time on that search, right? So,
Okay.
but I can't say, for instance, what I can't do is I can't tell at this level, based on what I'm showing on the page, I can't tell Bubble not to return the rest of the information that I have access to, that I have permissions to see.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
I think I understand what you're saying. So if I said, if you're in your privacy rules and you say everyone else can see, right, the everyone else thing, and this is basically opting in when you check a box, right? So if I say, first, last, and I don't know, state, those are the only fields that I want everyone else to be able to see about that user, right? Then when the bubble returns the list,
it's only returning that
maybe
information.
Got it. Okay. Got it. So then the other fields remain private. Like a smarty pants developer couldn't find them by inspecting.
Exactly.
Okay.
Otherwise known as bad actor hackers, right? Yeah, we just want to keep our sensitive information out of their hands. Now, the interesting thing about privacy rules and something to understand is sometimes you don't want the person who's using the app to be able to see this information, but you do want them to have interactions with this information. And this is a reason for backend workflows, because when I have a backend workflow, I can say not just on the workflow itself, but I can also, when I schedule the workflow, I can tell the workflow to ignore privacy rules, which would mean that even the current user that comes into this workflow could have access to other things in the database that they wouldn't on the page, but they would in workflows. So an example of when I used that was I did a two-sided gig marketplace at the beginning of last year, and I needed to have like the business interact with the freelancer and for like the Stripe payments and things like that. Well, I wasn't exposing emails for any user to any other user, but I needed to access the user's email or whatever it was. And so I just sent it into the back end. Something I would normally run on the front end, I sent into the back end only to get access to the ignoring the rules.
So an example of that, I think, in my app is that like you would never see a user, I would never want them to see a user's email address. However, they can search by email address and it can return a list of users that match that email address.
Precisely. So you could send the email in as the parameter on the workflow as a text, and then you could ignore the privacy rules and do a search for a user with that email.
Okay. Great. Okay. What about yeah. No, I think that kind of covers it. So on my backend workflows at this point, I've just checked ignore privacy rules every time. Just as I was building, I was like, I don't even know what that means really. And so I'm just gonna check it.
That's probably fine. So because when you're running the backend workflows, it's not sending anything back to the page automatically. So like in your scenario that you just said, okay, I want to search and see if there is a user with that email, then the trick is going to be, well, how do I communicate to the browser that that's the case? Like that there is a user with that email. And so and to pull up that user, like so that they could friend them potentially, right?
Right.
So like that's going to be the development work behind that, is like, how am I going to return something from this workflow that will have an effect on the page, because the backend workflows don't automatically connect to the page.
Yeah. Okay. What about, so let's say I have my app is essentially like a review app. It's kind of like Rate My Professor, but it's for startup employees, right?
Sure.
So I can leave a review on you, and that is a public review that anyone can see, right?
Okay.
But you can flag that review and say it's, obscene or something. It's not, doesn't follow the community guidelines. And then we, on the admin side, can remove that review, right? But we're not technically deleting it. We're just marking it in the database as removed, right? So in that case, now when I return a list of reviews for you, I want that review that I had flagged and removed to not show up at all. Even, in a hidden kind of way. So can you specify that, like, in the privacy rules that, like, don't?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
So in here, like, we would have a bye, Jordan.
Hi, Jordan.
We would have a data type here called review. And one of the things on the review would be removed, and it could be yes, no, right? And then based on this yes, no, and the privacy rules, I can say, define a new rule, and I can say admin can see them all. If the user submitted the review, they can see it. And then for everyone else, I would do, well, here I have to do one to see the everyone else, right? So everyone else, I could, I probably wouldn't have an everyone else. I would say no one can see anything without being logged in or something to that effect. And then self would be the person who created the review, and then other users. And then what I would say is when this review is removed is no, then current user, no, and current user is logged in. That would allow the current user to see all of the reviews where the removed is equal to no.
Got it. So now the current user is logged in thing, let's say it's kind of like Facebook or LinkedIn, right? Where, like, I don't have to even have an account to see things. That's just public, right?
It's just public. Okay. So you could just make it this review. You don't have to put the and here, right?
Okay. Okay.
You can say this review removed is no. Everyone can see everything.
Great. Okay.
And then you would also probably put that at the repeating group level as well, right? Like wherever you're showing it, you would do a search for or whatever, and then only show it if the removed is no.
Right. Yep.
But you could covertly, like, I think what they call it is shadow banning in the social media world, where you could make it so the person who submitted the review can see their own reviews, even if the remove is yes. So they don't know that no one else can see their reviews.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
So they can put as many terrible, horrible, no good, very bad reviews as they want. You can make them know. Probably you would ban them just because you don't want to keep reviewing reviews, right?
Right.
But you could keep saying no, and they don't know the difference. Like,
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And the same thing would hold true what you just did with the reviews removed as no. Let's say I've written a review, but I haven't submitted it. But, like, it's not done, right? So it's still in the edit phase. I have a field called submitted, which is a yes, no field. So then I would just say submitted is no, or submitted is yes, then everyone can see it.
Yep.
Okay.
Submitted, yes. Yeah. So when this review's removed as no and this review submitted as yes, then everyone can see it. And then for the self, you could say when this review creator, this review's creator is current user, then regardless of whether it's removed or submitted, they can see it.
Got it. Okay. Okay. There's one other scenario that I'm forgetting about now. No. Okay. I think that answers it. So the client, as you know, my client wanted to use Algolia for search, which I just haven't set up yet. And I read an article today that said that Algolia does not recognize privacy rules. Is that, do you know anything about that?
Right. So I think that's true, but that's okay because when you're going to be using the native integration here, right?
Yeah.
And so you set your rules here, and I think it's compatible with this.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it'll return the results from Algolia will return somewhere. I don't know if they return how that works exactly, but I'll double check on that. Check here to begin indexing these public fields. So yeah, I think it's compatible. I'll double check on that.
Okay.
But generally, generally we're not using Algolia to do results on non-public things anyway.
Right.
Like on private
Right.
things anyway.
Yeah. Right. That's fair. Okay. Is there any implication of using like LinkedIn login OAuth stuff and privacy rules?
So I mean, if you're OAuthing the person with LinkedIn, I consider the way I have it framed in my head, and nobody's corrected me, and I've kind of put it out there. The way that I have it framed in my head is OAuth is basically just in place of the password, right?
Yeah.
So instead of requiring the user to use a password, you just require that they already be logged into LinkedIn. And then the way you associate that LinkedIn OAuth with the public user is by the email field. So the current user is logged in would still apply, because if they used OAuth to log in, they're logged in once the OAuth goes through.
Got it. Okay. I'm gonna look at my app and see if there's any other sort of weird stuff that I was trying to figure out.
I also was meaning to check on this. So Juan sent me like a month ago, there was someone who was doing like a webinar, and they have a software to help you like find and patch any kind of security issues with your app.
Oh, yeah. Is it no code, no hack, no code, or no? Is that what you're talking about?
That. Yeah.
Yeah. I heard that was like a terrifying webinar. Several people have mentioned it. They were like, oh shit.
That was bad. Oh, because of how scary it is? Yeah.
Just how bad they said that Bubble can be if you're not
careful. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have to take that with a grain of salt, because they're trying to sell a product, right?
Sure. So, yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I think privacy rules, I haven't heard of anyone getting around privacy rules. I was very proud last year that my privacy rules broke Canvas. So they changed, instead of having me change my privacy rules, they changed Canvas.
Wow.
I was like, okay.
Nicely done.
Done.
Cool. Oh my God. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was really helpful.
No problem. Yeah, and if you get stuck with anything, I do think that the privacy rules testing idea, where you make a page with each of your data types, and you can label them nicely, and you can go through, and you can run as different users with different permissions just to test, right? So the only purpose of it is just to look at the data that's being returned.
Right.
And then not related to the privacy rules, but related to the app performance thing, I think I will start playing around with like, I wish you could have different contexts for different users on different pages, right? For privacy rules, because like one thing in particular is in Canvas, we use it used to be called the website object, and I actually like calling it the website object. So it's just one entry, like one record in the database that contains all of the variables for the user's own app. So like their logo and their colors and things like that. And then you refer to those things dynamically, because then that gives you the ability to make an app admin page where they can make changes in the database, and it will affect everything without having to redeploy. But the thing that is storing everything on that data type, well, we would load that data type in the header, which is on every single page. And I had one app with an erroneous 4 megabytes of text in one of those fields on that website object, and it completely crashed loading the page because it was loading all of that information. But the one that I run into more often is we're storing the privacy policy and the terms of service text in fields on that data type record, on that one record. And I think it makes, I started refactoring that out of there because it causes havoc with page load, because it's very.
Sorry, you had that in a data type, in a record?
Yeah, so I'll show you. So this is built on Canvas, and what's now called the app settings used to be called the website data type. And all it is it's one record that we have in our data here that has all of the information related to the app, right? So app-wide HTML header,
wow,
and stuff like that. And this is how we make our app admin portal page work, right? Is because when the user is changing things like their colors and stuff, then what they're doing is they're changing settings here. The thing that I'm cautioning against is for you and anyone who might be watching, is we have here, maybe they finally took it out, not seeing it, privacy. Nope, it's still here. So we have the policy here, and this sample is really small. But lawyers like usually go on and on and on and on and on. And so it's very easy for this to bulk up, and also for the terms of service to bulk up as well. And it's causing crazy load times, because every time that a page is loaded, it has to load this thing in there and all of this text. So that's what I meant by like starting to I'm starting to use more and more data types to break up the information.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell, Bubble does not work the way that I would want it to, where it would look and see which fields are needed on the page and then load only those fields. It's going to load everything. So this is a really key concept in like developing admin pages. And this stuff is fine because this is all tiny, right?
Yeah.
So it's only the big text ones, really, because even these are just URLs.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So it's only the really, like, if you're dealing with any amount of text, like significant amount of text, you need to break that up into its own data type. And yeah, and that's something that I'm hoping that they're changing. Like, I would really like for them to move towards allowing us to specify, like, only load if needed or something like that.
Yeah.
So, or if they just automatically could do that, that would be great. I don't know if figuring that out would take, that processing that would take longer, maybe, but. That would
So
be,
what you would do instead then is have you would have a new data type called privacy policies, right? Let's say.
yep.
And
So
then
I
you
would,
just relate.
I would do, yeah. So the way I've done it before is I came in here in the option set and I said legal type.
Mhm.
And then the legal type has privacy and terms. And then in the data types, I make a type called legal.
Mhm.
And the legal will have the text here and it will have a type.
Yeah.
Here. So now I would have two different things, one each of a privacy policy and a terms. And then I would I can find that easily in a search because I can search legal things of type privacy or terms.
Mhm.
And first
And you
item.
would, how would you connect it then to the client or whatever? Would you put it as a list on the, or not, I guess it wouldn't be a list. Or yeah, it would be a list, wouldn't it?
Yep. So I'd go to my admin portal. And I would, after it loads and it lets me, I'm going to look for the pop-up here. Because it might be in a reusable. Admin.
System legal pop-ups.
Yes, system legal
It's on the
pop-up.
left. Yeah, right
There we go. So I'd come into here and I would change this where it's getting its data source here. So it's saying var app settings, type of content, app settings, right? And it's looking here. So I would change this data source. Bye, Thomas. I would change this data source to be probably like a legal thing.
Mhm.
And I know I'm looking at the terms of service. So I could either search for it on page load or I could just clear this out and do a search for legal thing where the type equals terms, first item.
Yeah.
Right. And then this would parent groups legals text. And then I could edit that directly. Yeah.
Got it.
And that way it's only ever loading in the admin portal and also on the actual page that it's being used.
Right. It's not going to load on every page
Exactly.
because it's in a separate data type. Okay, cool.
Yep. Especially that because people very rarely go and look at your terms of service.
Yeah, who wants to see that? Exactly.
Like most people never even open it up. So why would we load it on every page? I don't know.
Right. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Okay, let me just think for a second. So, yeah, do you mind if I share my screen and sort of? Okay. I'm not sure I'm thinking about this the right way. Okay, can you see it?
I can.
Okay, all right. So this is my profile on this app, right? So these are reviews other people have left for me. Now reviews are anonymous. So if I want to look at this review here, we call it a take. The review is called a take. Here's what it looks like. Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't show it. Okay, cool. Well, okay, actually, let me go back. So this is a better example. So let's say I want to look at my character traits. These are things that people have tagged about me and said, I'm hardworking, enthusiastic, whatever. These are sort of the top ones that people have said about me. So if I click on this, I can see like a list of all the things people have said about me. And if I click on one of these, it will show me the takes that people have mentioned that character trait on, right? And then I can click through and view the full take, right? Now, you see this page is so big. Okay. You see right here, it has this little circle, right?
Mhm.
Now, if this was my take, a self, you write a take for yourself, right? If it was my take, I would have my picture here, right? But if
Okay.
it's someone else's take, because it's an anonymous thing, it won't have their picture here, right? So in terms of privacy, let's say, so in this case, I want the image and the name and everything to be hidden. But if I am looking at this person's profile, I can see their image and their name, right? So like I can see other people's photo and name unless that person wrote a take for me.
You can't, so you can only see it when it's not in a take. So I think in that case, I think that's what I was kind of saying is there's no way to do contextual privacy rules. So that would just be, trying to think how you could prevent people from like inspecting to see something, right?
Yeah, because the thing that we want to protect from is them seeing the author, basically, of this
Right.
take.
So like this would be another reason why you might want to separate out into a user profile that's public info versus a user data type, because you could have the takes be associated with the user and not the user profile. And then you could protect the user so they can't see anything about the user, right? They could see the take, but they wouldn't be able to see the user on the take who created it.
Could the inverse be true also, that like there's an author data type?
Right. You can have an author data type, and then because they can't see the user, they wouldn't be able to see the author, but they'd be able to see it would be connected to the user through the author, but they wouldn't be able to see the author because they wouldn't be able to see the user.
Right. Oh my God. So basically, in order to protect this data the way I need to, I have to separate out those data types. Is that what you're saying?
No, I think your idea of doing that one satellite thing is probably a pretty easy fix, because you, instead of having I don't think you would need that. I think you definitely need to separate out and have a user profile. Because if you allow people to see certain things about the user, you can't keep them from seeing it in searches that they might do in the inspection and stuff. Otherwise, because you can't do it by context. So I think that's what I'm saying is you would have a separate data type for the things that you want them to be able to see in the user profile, and then just go ahead and lock down the user. And that way you can create your takes, and they can't see anything about the user when they're viewing a take because they can't see the user. But when they're looking at a user profile, they can see it because they would have permissions to see the user profiles.
Right. Oh my God. That changes so much.
I guess it changes things. Yeah, you would have to change the references on those profiles, but I don't know if you're using that information in other places. So,
right. And the profile, you're saying like, okay, so you can be an author of a take and you can be the subject of a take, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm totally fine with it's necessary for you to see the subject of the take, right? that's a user at this point. The author of the take is the thing we want to hide. So if I'm saying, when you say a user profile as a separate data type.
So here's the tricky thing, is your user data type is the creator of all of the things that they make while they're using the app.
Right.
And if the current user has permissions to view anything about the user who created something, then they could potentially find that out on the page. So it wouldn't be truly anonymous in the sense that it might be anonymous in terms of what you're giving them access to in the design on the page, but not in terms of what you're preventing them from seeing from Bubble's database. So I would, I know that's a lot to consider, but I think that's how I would do that, is I would make the user profile, because you can't factor out that the creator is the user, right? The creator of a thing that you're letting somebody see is the user.
Yeah, that's
that
right. Yeah.
That data would be returned by Bubble no matter what, if they have permission to see that user. So in any capacity.
So yeah, I get what you're saying. So, okay. So sorry, just to sort of strategize for myself. If I created a separate data type called author.
I don't think that will work.
No.
Because the author is still going to be the user when they create the take. Because the created by is going to have the user no matter what.
Right. Oh, I see. Oh my God. Okay. I understand it now. So what you're saying, sorry.
It's okay.
So okay. I think I get it now. So basically the profile is going to be anything, either the subject or the author, but then you hide the user from everything, right?
Right.
I mean, you hide from everyone. Because if someone created this take and they're a user, and I can see users when I'm looking at, like, say, a profile, right? Because that I would have to have the permission to see the user in order to look at anyone else's profile, because this is all stored under the user. So the only way to make the subject or the author of a take private is for all user information to be private, unless it's your own user, right?
Exactly. And then that would mean your profile needs to be pulled from a user profile, which is not protected by privacy rules.
Right. Ah, damn it.
I'm so
sorry. What's so funny is I have rebuilt this app. It exists already. And they had done it that way, but not because of privacy rules. I'm pretty sure they had done it for, like, other reasons. And I was like, well, that just complicates everything. We're just going to go simpler. And God.
Yeah. Privacy rules are like a mind thing. Like, I get why it's so hard, why it's so easy to ignore them as you start, and I've had to go back and refactor apps and put privacy rules in that weren't implemented in the bill.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. So I'm sorry that's the answer, but I think that's the answer. No,
I'm glad. I'm so glad. Because, like, what if I launch this thing with it? Can you think of, like, if you're looking at this app and you're thinking of, I mean, I know you don't know the inner workings of it, but, like, how many hours do you think it would take you to refactor that specific thing?
So it takes I think the most it's ever taken is 12 hours.
12 hours. And you know this stuff. Oh.
So I had to do that with the dev. We took over an app that was that didn't have any privacy rules, and it was the number one first priority when we took over the app. Mm-hmm. Now his was a lot more. The app I'm thinking about was a lot more complicated because I had like 5 different user types, and so the privacy rules were like more complicated because the more user types you have and the more they interact with each other, the more it takes. So this doesn't seem to be as complicated because you don't have a lot of users with different permissions in terms of like what they can do interacting with other users. Mostly it's just the only interaction is then being able to view other things, right?
Yeah. So, well, the one is that like if you're not logged in, you can't, if you don't have a profile, you can't search, right? So like if I click on search, I can't, it so just like a pop-up happens.
Like I would go, probably where I would start is I would use the app search tool, and I would use the uses field tool to go and find all of the places where you're referring to that public information. Mm-hmm. So you can change it over to being the user profile.
Okay. Can you say more about that?
Sure. I can share my screen if you want. I wish I could train Zoom not to close my window when I share my screen. I've looked in the settings, but I haven't found it yet. Okay, so using the app search tool, I would go to uses field, and then I would say on the user, and I would say something like uses their profile picture, because I don't want to refer to the user's profile picture anymore, wherever I'm referring to it. I want to send that into the user's profile picture, right? So I'd create the data, the user profile data, and I'd set the fields, and then I would go one by one, and I would go find all of the places in the app where each of those fields is being used currently, and I'd convert it over to the new setup.
Huh. I have never even heard of this tool.
This is the app search tool, and it is your very best friend, because even though it's taking a while to do it, it's searching on every single page and every single workflow. And it's finding all of the references to this particular field. So I have 9 times where I refer to the profile picture. It looks like this is when the user is changing their profile picture. The same here, same here. So this is where I'm using that profile picture in the admin portal. So if I click here, it will take a while to load because the admin portal is very heavy. But once it does load, it'll show me exactly where this element is that's showing this, and I can change that to be looking for the user profile's profile picture instead.
Got it. Okay.
And so if you just kind of lay out a list of all of the things you need to change, you can use the app search tool to go one by one and change it over and feel pretty confident that you haven't left any of them behind. And I would do that before, say, I would make sure that my use of this field is completely empty. Before then, I would deprecate it by actually deleting the field on the user.
Yeah. Okay. App search tool. It's funny. I've always seen that little guy there, and I'm like, I don't know what that does.
It's super powerful. The thing that it doesn't do that I wish it would do is finding a custom state. Like there's custom states are sort of this like really sort of vague nebulous concept for people in Bubble. And I think one of the reasons why is because you can have a custom state on any element, right? That's why Greg John recommends putting it at the page level. And I've adhered to that like strictly since I started. But there's no way to find all of them, right? Because you have the states on the element, but then when I think maybe I can find the action with the app tool. I can say, I can find here, the action type is to set a state.
Okay.
So I can find where I'm setting them, but I can't find all of where they exist. Like, I can't get a good view of where all the custom states exist in my app. And it's so easy to make custom states and then end up
and then
not needing them and that kind
Yeah.
of thing. So
yeah.
that's one thing I wish they
Wow.
would do, is give me access to that. But outside of that, this is pretty powerful, because if you're ever trying to look for like all of the things in an app and you know that it's across so many different pages and it's easy to forget, you can come in here and you can find them.
Right. Wow. Okay. All right. I gotta, this is thanks. And also, damn you.
I'll take it.
Yeah. I do appreciate it. I will holler at you about just taking a look at everything once I get it all set up. And then,
Sure. Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Tanya.
You're
I'm gonna
welcome,
go
Kelly.
get started on all this.
Okay. I will talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye. This concludes our episode number 204. I think we're 204. So we will be back tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific time for episode 205. If you'd like to join us and ask all of your bubble questions, you can. You just go to pronocoders.com and sign up, and we would love to have you. We'd love to hear your questions and see how we can help you get them all answered. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll